It was years since I could remember his coming to New York in that condition, right? He's sober. Bill Wilson, they were drinking buddies, through college in the early days. And Bill always said, if I ever get as bad as Ebby Thatcher, I'm going to quit drinking, right? I mean, there was a guy in college, I said, if I ever get as bad as Grog, I'm going to quit drinking. And I'm sure there were people that said, if I ever get as bad as John Henry, I'm going to quit, right? It was years since I could remember his coming to New York in that condition sober. I was amazed. Rumor had it that he had been committed for alcoholic insanity. I wondered how he had escaped. So what they did back when they couldn't stop drinking, it was quite easy for people to get committed to an asylum for alcoholic insanity. And they would keep you there until the doctor deemed that you were well. So there was no 30-day stay or anything else. They could keep you there as long as they wanted to. And Ebby Thatcher, he came from a prominent family in Albany. I think his father was the mayor, and he was causing trouble. And his father said, "Go out to the summer place in Vermont, sober up, damn you, sober up. And while you're out there, I want you to fix up our summer house." So Ebby Thatcher is out there, and in one instance, he drove his car into somebody's living room, and then maybe the next day or a day or two later, he was painting the house, and some pigeons did their business on his new paint job. He got a shotgun and started blasting holes to kill the pigeons, but he was blasting holes in the house. So they came and they arrested him, and he was in front of the judge, and he was about to be committed, right? I mean, that's what crazy people do. I wondered how he had escaped. So Bill's thinking, how the hell did he get out of that one? Of course, he would have dinner, and then I could drink openly with him. Underline the next 3 lines. Unmindful of his welfare, I thought only of recapturing the spirit of other days. There was that time we had chartered an airplane to complete a JAG. Just highlight that, and next to it write total selfishness. Bill doesn't care that Ebby's sober. He's only thinking, I need somebody to drink with. I don't give a damn if he's sober or not or what I'm going to do to him. His coming was an oasis in this dreary desert of futility. The very thing an oasis, drinkers are like that. The door opened and he stood there fresh-skinned and glowing. Underline this little line, there was something about his eyes. So next to that, write psychic change in Ebby. Ebby hadn't been sober for years. And all of a sudden he's there, he's looking good, his eyes are glowing, and he's sober. That's a psychic change in Ebby. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? I pushed a drink across the table, he refused it. Disappointed, but curious, I wondered what had gotten into the fellow. He wasn't himself. Come, what's all this about? I queried. He looked straight at me, simply but smiling, he said, underline those 3 words, I've got religion. Dun, dun, dun. Let's write Oxford Group after that. Oxford Group. I was aghast. Bill didn't like that at all. So that was it. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. Now I suspected a little cracked about religion. He had that starry-eyed look. Yes, the old boy was on fire, all right. But bless his heart, let him rant. Besides, my gin would last longer than his preaching. So next to that, let's write more selfishness. More selfishness. Crazy, I'm just going to keep drinking. But he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, so no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told how 2 men had appeared in court, persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. They had told circle of a simple religious idea, just that, and next to it write step 2. Step 2. They had told of a simple religious idea, that is step 2, the simple religious idea. And then underline, and a practical program of action. Next to that, we're going to write 3 through 12. 3 through 12. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked. So where we wrote 3 through 12, we're also going to write at the bottom, write service work, helping people. Service work, helping people. And then somewhere in there, the 2 men had appeared in court. We're going to write Roland Hazard, Rolandhazard, and Cebra Graves, Cebra Graves, Graves. And you can write Oxford Group.
What was Roland's last name?
Hazard, Hazzard. We're going to read it. We're going to talk about him next week, too. So, how lucky are we? Because there's Ebby Thatcher out in Vermont, and what a total coincidence that Roland Hazard's father said, Roland, you're sober for the first time in your life. Why don't you grab your friends and go out to our summer place in Vermont and have yourself a good vacation? And if they would have gone a couple days earlier or a couple days later, they would not have been in the same place at the same time as Ebby Thatcher. They wouldn't have stepped in front of the judge. Ebby Thatcher would have been committed, and he wouldn't have gone to Bill Wilson's 2 months later. So how lucky were we? That's a first break. We caught a really good break there. He had come to pass his service, his experience along to me, if I cared to have it. So next to that, write step 12 rather. So Ebby Thatcher is at the Calvary Mission. He's been sober 2 months. And they say, Ebby, you're doing pretty good, but you know what? One of the Oxford Group tenets is that you go out and you share what you've got and try to help other people. And you're not doing that. So is there anybody that you think that you can call and go help? And of course, Ebby's thinking, yeah, that old mooch, Bill Wilson. That guy's over there mooching off his wife, drinking everything. I'm going to go over and see Bill Wilson. I was shocked but interested. Certainly I was interested. I had to be. Highlight those 4 words, for I was hopeless. And we're going to write step 1. Step 1. So Bill really is hopeless. He talked for hours. Oh, off to the left too, let's write act our way into better thinking. Right? One of the things for Ebby was to go out and do some good. So write act our way into better thinking. So this program is going to ask us to do a lot of things, to take a lot of actions, and as a result of taking these actions, we're going to change the way that we think. All other therapies in the world are going to say, change the way you think, and then you change your actions. Sit on the couch, tell me about your childhood. In AA, we are backwards people. We've got to change our actions first. If we can change our actions, our thinking will follow. But we've got to do the actions first. We've got to take that leap of faith. He talked for hours. Childhood memories rose before me. I could almost hear the sound of the preacher's voice as I sat on still Sundays, way over there on the hillside. There was that proffered temperance pledge I never signed, my grandfather's good-natured contempt of some church folk and their doings, his insistence, highlight the next 3 lines, that the spheres really had their music, but his denial of the preacher's right to tell him how he must listen, his fearlessness as he spoke of these things. And I don't even know if this is true, but they had me do it at the First Code Blue. Circle denial and put only denial in book. And I don't know if they mean the first 164 pages. And I've never verified that, so take it with a grain of salt. So Bill was raised by his grandfather. His mother dropped him off and took off to New York. I think he was around 12. And his grandfather had a very large chip on his shoulder, a lot of contempt towards preachers and what they did, and he passed that contempt along to Bill. His fearlessness as he spoke of these things just before he died. These recollections welled up from the past. They made me swallow hard. That wartime day in old Winchester Cathedral came back again. Now isn't that something? Bill was in his early 20s, and he's thinking about, he talks about being in that cathedral and having something that he didn't quite get. And now it's coming back to him. So that tells me that God has been working on Bill all these many years. Let's highlight the next line. I had always believed in a power greater than myself. Just that little line. I had often pondered these things. I was not an atheist. Few people really are, for that means blind faith in the strange proposition, I underline this just because I like it, the strange proposition that this universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. whenever, I got some people at work that are semi-atheists, and I pull out that line now and again. I say, so the universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even the evolutionists, suggested vast laws and forces at work. Despite contrary indications, I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlay all. Underline the next 3 lines. How could there be so much of precise and immutable law and no intelligence? Immutable means can't be changed. I simply had to believe in a spirit of the universe. And underline that. It's another word for God that Bill uses. Who knew neither time nor limitation, but that was as far as I had gone. With ministers and the world's religions, I parted right there. When they talked of a God personal to me, who was love, superhuman strength, and direction, I became irritated and my mind snapped shut against such a theory. So at the bottom of the page you can write, people have had bad experiences with organized religion. Right? A lot of people come in here and they say, don't talk about that God thing, right? I've even had people say, John, if you talk about God, you're going to run off the newcomer. Right? And one of my sponsors taught me that if that newcomer, if you run him off by talking about God, whiskey's going to put him right back in here. So don't worry about it. But people have had bad experiences with organized religion. To Christ I conceded the certainty of a great man, not too closely followed by those who claimed him. His moral teaching most excellent. Okay, underlined to the end of the paragraph. For myself, I had adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I disregarded. So let's write half measure. Half measure. Right? So we can see that Bill is having a terrible time with this religious idea. He thinks there's something out there, but he doesn't know what it is. And he's certainly saying there's no way that whatever it is going to bother helping me. That's ridiculous. The wars which had been fought, the burnings and chicanery that religious dispute had facilitated made me sick. I honestly doubted whether on balance the religions of mankind had done any good. Judging from what I had seen in Europe and since, you can write since World War I, that's when he was over there. He saw the trenches and the gas. Europe and since, the power of God in human affairs was negligible. Let's circle these names for God. The brotherhood of man, circle that, a grim jest. If there was a devil, circle devil. He seemed the boss universal. Boss, circle that. And he certainly had me. So Bill's being rather skeptical here. But my friend sat before me and he made the point-blank declaration, highlight to the word failed, that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. So next to that, we're going to write beyond human aid. Beyond human aid. That's why the self-knowledge of the disease that Bill had and his willpower didn't work because he's beyond human aid. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, underline the next 5 words, he had admitted complete defeat. Next to that, we're going to write step 1. Okay, so there's the hopelessness again, right there. Then he had in effect been raised from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. Okay, next to that, write promise. There it is again. From hopelessness to hope. And then underline the next 3 lines. Had this power originated in him? Obviously it had not. There had been no more power in him than there was in me at that minute. And this was none at all. Okay, so let's write identification with Ebby / 2 months sober. So Bill's seeing some, what is this? What's going on here? Identification with Ebby / 2 months sober. That floored me. It began to look as though religious people were right after all. Here was something at work in a human heart which had done the impossible. Underline this next sentence. My ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then. So next to that, we're going to write change in thinking. Change in thinking. Bill had been a captive of his old ideas. He had been a captive. Wouldn't change him. Never mind the musty past. Here sat a miracle directly across the kitchen table. He shouted great tidings. So whether Bill likes it or not, he's looking at Ebby and he's thinking to myself, this is living proof of this power that he's talking about. I still don't believe it, but how can I not believe my own eyes? I saw that my friend was much more than inwardly reorganized. Underline the next sentence. He was on a different footing. His roots grasped a new soil. So again, we're going to write psychic change. And we're going to talk about that psychic change next week and then again a couple weeks after that. Despite the living example of my friend, there remained in me the vestiges. Okay, so underline vestiges and then draw a little arrow and write old ideas. All Bill's old ideas that he got from Grandpa Griffith. The vestiges of my old prejudice. The word God still aroused a certain antipathy. When the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me, this feeling was intensified. I didn't like the idea. Underline the next 3 lines. I could go for such conceptions as creative intelligence, universal mind, or spirit of nature, but I resisted the thought of a czar of the heavens. Okay, so some more words for God. However his loving sway might be. I have since talked with scores of men who felt the same way. So basically Bill is saying, there's got to be a harder way to do this. It can't be this simple. This is way too simple, man. This is crazy. So what's going on here is, Ebby is 2 months sober, and he's at Bill's kitchen. Bill is 2/3 drunk, and Ebby's talking about God. Ebby is on fire, and the terms he's using are highly religious. And Bill he doesn't like it at all, and he doesn't want to listen. And they're arguing back and forth and back and forth. And I think Ebby finally got tired of it. And here's what he said. My friend suggested then what seemed a novel idea. Why don't you? I like that. Why don't you choose your own conception of God? I think Ebby he said, just pick your own then, Bill. I'm tired of arguing. So after that, we're going to write God as I understand him. God as I understand him. So right there, this message changed. This is no longer a religious message. A religious message says this is how you must believe. You've got to take this narrow pathway if you're going to get into heaven or get whatever rewards the religion promises. The spirituality, we don't care how you believe. The only question we ask is, are you willing to believe possibly that there's something greater than your little thoughts and your little problems? That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. Highlight the next 3 lines. Anytime you see the squiggly writing, it was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. So, again, there's no step 2. But right next to that, you're going to write Bill took step 2. Right here, he's taking step 2. I saw that growth could start from that point. Upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it? Of course I would. He's taking step 2 right here. Thus was I convinced that God is concerned with us humans when we want him enough. At long last, I felt, I believed. Scales of pride and prejudice fell from my eyes. Underline, a new world came into view. The real significance of my experience in the cathedral burst upon me. Remember, page 1. There it is. For a brief moment, I had needed and wanted God. There had been a humble willingness, underline willingness, to have him with me, and he came. But soon, underline, the sense of his presence had been blotted out by worldly clamors, mostly those within myself. Worldly clamors. You know, you've got to have a lot of money. You've got to have a big house. You've got to have a wife. You've got all of these things. You've got to be in charge. So above that, let's write, be still and listen. Be still and listen. And you can write, Bill was 39 years old. Third treatment. Sober date, we'll call it December 11th, 1934. Bill was 39 years old. Third treatment, sober date, December 11th, 1934. So, we're going to highlight the whole next paragraph here. So he's in the Towns Hospital right now on his third treatment. There I humbly offered myself to God, as I then understood him, to do with me as he would. I placed myself unreservedly under his care and direction. So we're going to write third step right there. Third step. I admitted for the first time that of myself I was nothing, that without him I was lost. So that is all the third step there. Okay. So after lost, put a little line, a little slash, if you would. I ruthlessly faced my sins. You can write step 4. And became willing to have my newfound friend, circle friend, and write God above it. It's capitalized. Take them away, root and branch. And you can write 6 and 7. Step 6 and 7. I have not had a drink since. My schoolmate visited me. Again, that's Ebby Thatcher. And they're in the Towns Hospital. And I fully acquainted him with my problems and deficiencies. Write step 5. Step 5. And you put a little slash after deficiencies. We made a list of people I had hurt or toward whom I felt resentment. Step 8. I expressed my entire willingness to approach these individuals, admitting my wrong. Never was I to be critical of them. I was to write all such matters to the utmost of my ability. We're going to write step 9. I was to test my thinking by the new God consciousness within. Common sense would thus become uncommon sense. Next to that, we're going to write step 10. Step 10. I was to sit quietly when in doubt. Highlight the next 4 lines. Asking only for direction and strength to meet my problems as he, circle he, because that's God, would have me. Never, underline never, was I to pray for myself except as my requests bore on my usefulness to others. You can stop highlighting there. Then only might I expect to receive, but that would be in great measure. So that's step 11 there. It's all step 11. My friend promised when these things were done I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator. Okay, so that's my friend is not capitalized. That's Ebby again. My friend promised when these things were done I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator. Next to that, write promise. That's another promise. And we're going to highlight to the end of the page that I would have the elements of a way of living which answered all my problems, right? And underline that to boot. I came here to quit drinking. And the funny thing is, when you go through this work and you do this work, you realize that your conceptions of and how you've been living, at least for me, most of them got wiped away and new ones came into view. And as long as I try to live by these principles, I kind of discovered that this is for all the problems in my life, I mean, I was like, God, take the booze away, but don't mess with my sex life or my money or my job or anything else. But if you do this, you discover that it's for everything. Belief in the power of God, plus enough, underline, willingness, honesty, and humility. Underline that. To establish and maintain the new order of things. And then, of course, the next three lines next three words highlight the essential requirements. So we're going to write 12 steps, mandatory. Mandatory. There's a lot of paradoxes, right? When we get to how it works, we are going to discover why they say suggested, right? We're gonna talk about that. Right here, they're saying it is essential and it is required. If you want to recover from this and have a good life, then you got to do it. Highlight the next four words: simple but not easy. So it is very simple, but we're going to have to do some work. A price had to be paid. It meant destruction of self-centeredness. Highlight to the end of the paragraph. I must, circle must, turn in all things to the Father of light. Underline that, another word for God, who presides over us all. So right here, they're telling us that we're going to have to give up the two things that are the most near and dear to us that we've had our whole lives, right? We're going to have to give up our booze and our self-centeredness. What a bummer. So after presides over us all, we're going to write, learn how to become selfless. Learn how to become selfless. Learn how to become selfless. These were revolutionary and drastic proposals, but the moment, circle these four words or underline, I fully accepted them, and draw a little arrow out and write surrendered. Surrendered. I believe that was the first Oxford group tenet, was surrender. The moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. There was a sense of victory. Underline the next sentence. There was a sense of victory followed by such peace and serenity as I had never known. And again, let's write promise. Another promise. Coming right and left. Everybody's, the only promises in the book are the 9-step promises. There are promises scattered throughout this whole book. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. Underline, God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. Okay, so we're going to write sudden spiritual experience next to that. Sudden spiritual experience. Now, that happened quickly, immediately, at once to Bill. Most of us are going to have a spiritual awakening, which happens gradually through the working of the steps. But Bill got it. Boom! He got hit by lightning. So this was somewhere around December 14th, 1934. And Bill always said that he had a vital spiritual experience in the town's hospital as the result of working these steps. And what happened was his old ideas were cast aside and the new ones took their place. And we know from that time until his death, he never had to take another drink. For a moment, I was alarmed and called my friend, the doctor, to ask if I were still sane. He listened in wonder as I talked. Again, you can write Dr. Silkworth, right? He's saying, Doc, you won't believe what happened. Finally, he shook his head, saying, something has happened to you I don't understand, but you had better hang on to it. Anything is better than the way you were. The good doctor now sees many men who have such experiences. He knows they are real. So next to that, we're going to write pink cloud time. So, I see a lot of people, when they first get sober, they are on that pink cloud, man. I just got sober. I just took step 1. I've been sober 3 weeks. I'm going to go counsel everybody, right? I see it, and that's okay to think that way. Enjoy it. Enjoy it. So let's highlight the whole next sentence, or paragraph, sorry. While I lay in the hospital, the thought came that there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what had been so freely given me. Perhaps I could help some of them. They, in turn, might work with others. Next to that, let's write, give it to keep it. Give it to keep it. And then we're going to highlight the next 4 lines. My friend, and again it's the little f, so it's Ebby again. My friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs, and circle that all. Particularly was it imperative to work with others, as he had worked with me. Faith without works was dead. We're going to see that a few times. Faith without works was dead, he said. And how appallingly true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life, at the top of the page, highlight the first 4 lines. Spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he did not work, he would surely drink again, and if he drank, he would surely die. So let's circle surely die, right? At the top of the page, let's write God speaks, right? God speaks, God has a plan. God will reveal it if you listen. Right? God speaks, God has a plan, God will reveal it if you listen. And they're telling us, sober or not, they're telling us that we're going to have trials and we're going to have low spots. They're going to come, man. They're going to come. That's what life is. Right? But if we stay close to this fellowship and this program, we're not going to have to drink over it. We will not have to drink. Because if we do drink, most of us are going to end up dead. So off to the right, we're going to write, first 6 months, Bill worked with 50 drunks, no success. First 6 months, Bill worked with 50 drunks. No success. He was running all over New York City, pulling people out of the gutter, ripping them off of the bar stools, dragging them to Oxford meetings, and talking about this great white light experience that he had. And he got nobody sober, right? Now, one of my sponsors, with a lot more sobriety than me, Charlie, he said he has seen this over and over and over again. He said he's seen people with good, solid sobriety. Good, solid 10, 15, 20 years sobriety. And these people, they stopped working with other people. They stop working with other people. What happens is they start thinking about their self again. They start thinking about themselves only. And after a while, their old problems come back. Their old problems come back. They remember their solution. They end up getting drunk. They end up getting in all kinds of trouble. He said we alcoholics need to have a lot of excitement in our lives. And some of the greatest excitement we can have is working with other people who are sick and dying. Right? You're working with somebody sick and dying. You're out there and all of a sudden you see this person return to health and then go out and work with still others. Tremendously exciting. Tremendously. And, people that stop doing that, then they lose their excitement. They stop going to meetings. And again, their old problems start piling up again. And the only thing they know is taking that drink, right? So we must work with others. Now, Bill, when he went to Akron and met with Dr. Bob, he remembered he stayed sober in 6 months because he tried to help other people. And when he went to Dr. Bob, he wasn't trying to save Bob. He remembered that if he worked with another alcoholic, he'd stay sober. My wife and I abandoned ourselves with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics, underline, to a solution of their problems. Okay, next to that, right? The steps. The steps. It was fortunate for my old business associates remained skeptical for 1.5 years, during which I found little work. Next to that, right? Patience. Patience. I got sober and I said, no, this time it's for real. You guys, you got to believe me. And I wanted everything right away. We've got to be patient. Got to be patient. I was not too well at the time and was plagued, underlined, by waves of self-pity and resentment. It's going to come. It's going to come. And that's why we've got to stay close to the fellowship and we've got to stay close to the program. This sometimes nearly drove me back to drink, underline, to save the day, but I soon found that when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. So if you're starting to feel self-pity and anger and anxiety, everything's starting to go bad, you get out there and grab yourself a sponsee, and all of a sudden those problems go away. Many times I've gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. Again, underline, it is a design for living that works in rough going. And again, let's write 12 steps. The 12 steps. We commence to make many fast friends, and a fellowship has grown up among us, of which it is a wonderful thing to feel a part. The joy of living we really have, even under pressure and difficulty. I have seen hundreds of families set their feet in the path that really goes somewhere. Have seen the most impossible domestic situations righted, feuds and bitterness of all sorts wiped out. I've seen men come out of asylums and resume a vital place in the lives of their families and communities. Business and professional men have regained their standing. There is scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us. So next to that whole thing, you can put a bracket and write promise of hope. Promise of hope. In one western city, that city is Akron, and its environs, there are 1,000 of us in our families. Underline, don't turn the page, underline to fellowship. We meet frequently so that newcomers may find fellowship. At the bottom of the page, let's write, what is your purpose today? What is your purpose today? My needs are met today. I must be of service. What is your purpose today? Question mark. My needs are met today. I must be of service. You know, they say the two most important days of your life, right? What are they? You know, a lot of people say, oh, the day I'm born and the day I die. Well, that's not true at all. The two most important days of your life are the day you're born and the day you figure out what your purpose is. What are you here for? We meet frequently so that newcomers may find the fellowship they seek. At informal gatherings, one may often see from 50 to 200 persons. We are growing in numbers and power. In 2010, AA is composed of over 115,700 groups. An alcoholic in his cups, above in his cups, you can write drunk or drinking, right? We might be in between drunks, but we're still in our cups. An alcoholic in his cups is an unlovely creature. Our struggles with them are variously strenuous, comic, and tragic. One poor chap committed suicide in my home. He could not or would not see our way of life. Off to the left, you can write head in the oven. The old gas oven. There is, however, a vast amount of fun about it all. I suppose some would be shocked at our seeming worldliness and levity. But just underneath, there is deadly earnestness. Underline this next sentence. Faith has to work 24 hours a day in and through us, or we perish. Most of us feel we need look no further for utopia. Next to utopia, you can write perfect place. Perfect place. We have it with us right here and now. Each day, my friend, simple talk in our kitchen multiplies itself in a widening circle of peace on earth and goodwill to men. So we're going to write just a few things. End of week 3. And then write, ask sponsee, do you want to go on? We've got to continually ask, hey, him or her, do you want to go on? And then we can write 36 years sober, 75 years old, 75 years old, and we have been 12-stepped by Bill W. End of week 3, ask sponsee, do you want to go on? 36 years sober, 75 years old, we have been 12-stepped by Bill W.
36 years old?
36 years sober, 75 years old when he died. Bill W., co-founder of AA, died January 24th, 1971. 36 years sober, 75 years. We have been 12-stepped by Bill W. And so that's, we're just about done, but that's what they did. They would send this book out to California, to an alcoholic out in California. So the first thing he does is he reads the doctor's opinion. He figures out what the problem is. Next, we've got Bill's story so that they can identify with another alcoholic and say, that is me. We see Bill go from fun drinking to eventually drinking because of absolute necessity to the sickest of all, which is drinking for oblivion. And then we get to see Bill recover from that condition. So we think that we're like Bill, and Dad Burnett, if he can recover, maybe I can do it too. This is the beginning of belief. It's the beginning of hope, right? So we're going to discover next week what the solution is. There is a solution. So that's it. Let's go to 63 and end with the third step prayer. Middle of the page. God, I offer myself to Thee to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. Peace. All right.